miss your old familiar friends, but waiting just around the bend. Everywhere you look, there's a heart, there's a heart.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, a tweet from Michael Benson reads, "A deal for Canelo versus Sergey Kovalev is reportedly imminent. Dates of October 19th or the 26th in Las Vegas. It's claimed Anthony Yarde would accept step-aside money to cancel. Frank Warren insists this isn't agreed and would be Yarde's decision, according to IDEC Boxing and Mike Kopinger." These are just my thoughts. There were a lot of people out there when they heard the news that Sergey Kovalev may become a potential opponent option for Canelo that weren't convinced that Canelo Alvarez has any real genuine intentions of fighting Sergey. And those people viewed that entire fiasco as a means, a vehicle for Canelo Alvarez to draw attention away from the people that he should be fighting at middleweight into a fight that in all likelihood won't even materialize, a fight with Sergey. There are those people. There are people that felt that Canelo's name being attached to Sergey's was just a smokescreen for him to circumvent other opponents that are right there waiting for him, some that have been waiting for a very long time. And I think that at minimum, with this tweet and with these reports, because there are other reports out there, what this tweet and what these reports indicate is that there must be some kind of an interest to see this fight happen on the Canelo Alvarez side of things. We know that the interest is there in regards to Sergey and his handler, Cafe Duva. We know that this is a fight that they would want, and they've expressed as much, that they're definitely open to it. But first, they have to deal with their mandatory challenger,
Anthony Yarde.
There was an offer. It was a lowball offer. At least that's how it was taken. That's how it was interpreted, that if you want to get Sergey Kovalev in the ring, you've got to offer him more money than that. We've discussed that, and I'll leave the links to those videos in the description box. But better still, for those people out there who weren't convinced that Canelo Alvarez does mean to fight Sergey Kovalev at some point, for those people who weren't convinced of that, I think that the fact that these reports are still circulating, the fact that this is still a talking point, this is still a story, that it hasn't gone away, it does kind of lend some credence to the notion that, yeah, Canelo does want to fight that guy.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, this news is coming at a time where Canelo Alvarez's name is not only attached to Sergey Kovalev's, but it's also attached to Sergey Derevyanchenko. You understand? That's another opponent option. Earlier this week, there were reports circulating that they also, Canelo and Sergey, those two teams, that they had entered negotiations, that there were conversations and dialogues established between them for Canelo to defend the red belt. So the fact that, both of these stories are circulating, neither one of them has gone away, it leaves the door open for any one of these fights to happen. In my previous video, I expressed that when you've got as many options as Canelo Alvarez, and you've got as many guys beating down your door for a fight like Canelo does, who knows what he will decide to do? Because no matter what, whoever he decides to fight, everybody that he doesn't fight is going to be pissed off.
Pretty much.
If you ask one guy, Canelo's ducking him, and he's ducking him, and he's ducking him, and it creates a situation to where no matter who Canelo Alvarez chooses to fight, there's always going to be someone who's unhappy about it. And that's just an occupational hazard. That's just, it comes with the territory. When you're a guy like Canelo, you have the status of a Canelo, and everybody wants a piece of you, but everybody can't get it. At least not at once. So I'll say that if it works out this way, if in fact,
if it happens,
if it works out that way, if Canelo does end up fighting Sergey Kovalev at some date, at some venue in October, I would not be averse to that at all. I think it's a great opponent option. I do think it's ambitious. I do think it's a dangerous fight. I view Sergey Kovalev as a fighter who is more capable of inflicting damage to Canelo than any one of the guys at middleweight. You understand that he is a bigger guy, a naturally bigger guy than both Canelo and them. He has a bigger punch. He has lots of experience at his weight. He is still competing at the championship level. Many people still view Sergey Kovalev, not all, but some. Many people still view Sergey Kovalev as being the most, or at minimum, one of the most formidable champions in the light heavyweight division. So in that way, it's not a lighter touch. It's not a showcase fight. It is a world champion. It would require Canelo Alvarez to leave his comfort zone and venture into a weight class where he's never done anything. So the intrigue and the element of danger is there. So I wouldn't be averse to the fight at all. But if the fight were to come off, it would reverberate throughout the middleweight division and what's going on there, because, well, that fight with Sergey Devianchenko, that's a mandated title fight. And if Canelo so chooses to circumvent that fight for a Kovalev fight, while Sergey Kovalev is a more formidable opponent option than Sergey Devianchenko, there still would be consequences. Canelo may end up forfeiting the red belt, and that red belt could end up in the hands of Sergey Devianchenko, thereby changing the topographical environment of 160 and who the champions are. And you can imagine what different fluctuations and changes could happen as a result of that. So I'm not opposed to Canelo fighting Sergey Kovalev, and I'm not opposed to Canelo fighting Sergey Devianchenko. But ultimately, trying to pin down, trying to forecast what decision he's going to make is very difficult. So all we can do is wait and see. But at minimum, I'll say that there does seem to be some kind of an interest in Canelo to fight Sergey, because if there wasn't, and that was all a smokescreen, we wouldn't still be hearing about it.
So there's that.
Let's just see what happens. Let's just see if there is any truth to it. Now, another arm of the story is how this would affect Anthony Yarde. Anthony Yarde, who's supposed to be fighting Sergey Kovalev in August. If he gets paid step-aside money, you got to think about how sweet that proposition is. I have always viewed this fight between Anthony Yarde and Sergey Kovalev as a fight that may be too much too soon for a guy who neither has an extensive amateur background or very much professional experience. Anthony Yarde taking this fight, if he were to take it, just the fact that it's that there are even wheels in motion for the thing, that surprised me.
Why?
Because this is a situation that he could easily walk away from with little to no consequence. What does Anthony Yarde really lose if he were to decide that, you know what, I don't want to fight Sergey Kovalev, now is not the right time for this fight, this may be too much too soon, or if his handlers made that decision for him? What does he lose in the process, you understand? There are some very sizable risks associated with Anthony Yarde going to Chelyabinsk, Russia, Kovalev's backyard, to challenge him for his world title in a situation that he doesn't really seem ready for. Maybe he is, and it's just not on paper. You know, we don't know. Maybe he would rise to the occasion. But on paper, the look of it is that this is a fight that he's not ready for. So just imagine if, you know, Canelo comes along, they work out a deal, Canelo and Sergey work out a deal, and Anthony Yarde gets step-aside money in the process. That's a fortuitous situation if I've ever seen one, because he'd get a payday without actually having to throw a punch. He'd get a payday for not throwing a punch, and he would thereby get to circumvent that fight with Sergey that may be too much and too soon for him. So, you know, it really would be a lucky turn of chance if Canelo does end up fighting Sergey. Could be very lucrative for Anthony Yarde, could be very beneficial. So we'll see how the cookie crumbles. We'll see what happens, because I can imagine that even now, there are people out there who are skeptical, that aren't yet quite convinced that Canelo really does want to fight Sergey Kovalev. And I understand that. This is the sport of boxing. Every single story we cover is fluid and is subject to change. That's saying that one minute you're hearing this, and the very next minute you could be hearing something else. Something that's the exact opposite. So let's let the story tell itself. But what I do want to communicate is the fact that the story is still floating around is very interesting. In other news, Tyson Fury could reportedly face Charles Martin in his next fight. It's claimed that ESPN want an American opponent, so the former IBF heavyweight champion who was dethroned by Anthony Joshua in 2016 is an option being considered, according to Mike Kopinger. These are just my thoughts on that. I mean, Charles Martin is a familiar face. He is coming off a rather sensational knockout, relatively speaking, so he is in the winner's bracket. I got mixed feelings about this fight, I do. I'm not saying the fight can't be entertaining, watching Tyson Fury go in there against a familiar face and doing what he does. Tyson Fury being one of the biggest heavyweights around, but also being one of the most nimble, one of the most agile, and one of the most defensively responsible. As far as the aesthetic, the fight could be entertaining, but I have mixed feelings because there's no other way to interpret this fight other than a keep busy fight. That's what it would be.
That's what it is.
And we just saw Tyson Fury in a keep busy fight, you understand. The Tom Schwarz fight
Schwarz?
was an inaugural fight for Tyson Fury to make his own heavyweight American debut, you understand? Because he's already fought here, but that felt like that was his reintroduction to the American public under the Top Rank banner. That was his inaugural fight with them. So he's done that. He's had his keep busy fight with Tom Schwarz. And if you go in there with Charles Martin, isn't that just another keep busy fight? You know, Tyson Fury's one of these guys who's got no shortage of criticisms for Anthony Joshua and everything he's accomplished so far. So how does it reflect on Tyson Fury when the best thing you're doing right now is fighting a guy that he beat 2 or 3 years ago? I mean, look, I'm not saying that the Charles Martin fight is a bad fight or he's terrible. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, look, Tyson Fury at some point has to be held responsible for the words that come out of his mouth. And if you think that Anthony Joshua is a big, stiff robot, he's a bum, all these different things, if this is your observation and your critique of that fighter, then what do you look like fighting guys that he fucking beat already? 3 years later, 2-3 years later, you know? There's something to be said about that. I'm not in opposition of the fight itself, but people are going to interpret it the way they're going to interpret it. So basically, these guys, Wilder, Fury, these guys get off saying Anthony Joshua's name, criticizing him, bad-mouthing him, berating everything he's ever accomplished. Yet the both of these guys, the best they've been able to do so far is what? Fight guys that he beat years ago? That's what you guys are doing? This the stuff that's supposed to make y'all king shit squaring off against his sloppy seconds. Look, we all know that Anthony Joshua's got his own full plate. He's got his own things to deal with ahead of what could be a rematch with Andy Ruiz. We all understand that, but better still, these are the main two guys that have been levying criticisms towards that fighter. These are the main two guys that have been bad-mouthing him throughout, before he even lost to Andy Ruiz. It didn't start there, and we all know that. These are the main two guys that got no shortage of shit to say, yet the both of them don't seem to have anything better to do than fight people that he beat already.
So he can't be that.
So yeah, I got mixed feelings. I'm not opposed to the fight, I just think that there is something there to be addressed. And let me tell you something. When you're as gregarious as Tyson Fury is, you got the gift of gab. You got no shortage of things to say on a regular basis, especially about Anthony Joshua, him least of all. You can't shut the fuck up about that guy. When you've spent so much time talking shit about that guy, talking him down, everything he does, and then you find yourself in there with someone that he's fought before, a common opponent, that puts pressure on you to compete on the level. Oh, I know. Styles make fights. We say it here all the time. And it's true. Styles do make fights. You can't forecast the outcome of a contest between two guys just because they both perform differently against a common opponent. Boxing don't work like that. But that doesn't stop people from saying the things that they say. And therein lies the pressure. That's where it is. That you can't spend all this time talking shit about Anthony Joshua, and God forbid you go in there against Charles Martin and you have a tougher time with him than Anthony Joshua did. Because what people are going to say is, man, you talk mad shit, but you had to go life and death with that guy. And I reiterate, styles make fights. Triangle theories don't work. Tyson Fury, hypothetically speaking, if he were to struggle with Charles Martin, right? If he were to struggle with that guy, that in no way, shape, or form indicates how he would perform against Anthony Joshua. It doesn't. Because Charles Martin and Anthony Joshua are two different fighters. So, in that way, that's why the triangle theory doesn't work. But better still, people are going to cross-compare performances. They are. They're going to do it. It's just a matter of fact. They were doing it this past weekend when it comes to Luis Nery, and how Luis Nery, he looked confused. He looked a bit befuddled at times with Payano, whereas Naoya Inoue dispatched him with the first two punches that he threw. So people are going to do it.
They're going to do it anyway.
Fighting Charles Martin comes with an added bit of pressure that fighting someone else may not come with, because
It's not a common opponent.
people are going to expect Tyson Fury to not only win, not just win, but win in good fashion. Similar fashion on the level of how Anthony Joshua won. And if he comes short, if he comes up a bit short of that, yeah, people are going to have something to say. And finally, Kenny Porter, trainer and father to Shawn Porter, the WBC champion, had this to say. He says, Errol Spence is out of shape, whereas we've been training for 8 weeks. And in the article, he discusses how, Shawn is being viewed as the underdog, and They're accustomed to that. The Team Porter is accustomed to being viewed in that way in regards to entering in fights where the other guy is bigger or taller or whatever's going on. And that the fact of the matter is that Shawn Porter has already started his preparations for this fight.
Whereas Errol is fat.
Whereas in the case of Errol Spence,
He's fat.
You know, he's looking a little tubby out there. These are just my thoughts. You expect that Kenny Porter is going to have these kinds of sentiments. You expect him to say these kinds of things, discussing the avenues of opportunity that they plan to venture in order to beat Errol Spence. I mean, that's their plan. That's what they're trying to do. So this kind of talk is expected, and all we can do as fans is reflect upon it and discuss where the truth may be, where the truth lies in regards to what Kenny Porter is saying. And I will say that, yes, Spence being a welterweight of very generous proportions, this guy does tend to look kind of heavy between fights. You gotta wonder, for a guy like this, the clock is ticking. How long, for how much longer can this fighter continue to make 147, continue to fight as a welterweight? You know, I've entertained possibilities in regards to Errol Spence that go as far as suggesting that he may very well move up to the junior middleweight division if the welterweight division is just too hard on his body to make. Oh yeah, and this is at a time when fighters in the junior middleweight division like Julian Williams are calling him out. We know how the PBC likes to keep everything in-house, and it's entirely within the realm of possibility, as far as I'm concerned, that Errol Spence, maybe he beats Shawn Porter, maybe he gets a Pacquiao fight, but if he doesn't, you know, let's say he beats Shawn,
hypothetically,
and he's looking to get a Pacquiao fight, but he can't get it. It's entirely within the realm of possibility that he could leave the weight class, go up there to 54, and nix any possibilities of him fighting Terrence Crawford. Oh yes, this is real, people. The PBC is they didn't get that reputation for no reason. In order to keep things in-house, you see that they're disavowing the WBO as an organization. You see that they don't want to recognize them. They don't even want to mention them or any of their champions. So is it far-fetched to say that Errol may potentially move up at some point and never fight Crawford? Yeah, that could happen. And a part of the reason that I believe that is because of what Kenny Porter is saying. Errol Spence does get noticeably big between fights. Those things in mind, you have to wonder, how long is he going to be able to make welterweight? How long is he going to be able to make 147? I'll tell you that the Crawford fight doesn't seem to be a priority to the people over there at the PBC. It doesn't seem to be a priority to Errol Spence, so it's entirely within the realm of possibility that given how much Errol Spence blows up in weight between fights, at some point in the not-so-far-away future, he may move up, having never fought Terrence Crawford. So I reflect upon these comments from Kenny Porter in regards to the condition of Errol Spence and their preparation for that fight. And you know what? Yes, he is touching on something real, and Kenny Porter does know a thing or two about preparing for a situation. His son, Shawn Porter, was widely regarded as little more than just a pressure fighter. That was his base style. That's how people looked at him. And he was a pressure fighter the same way that Omar Figueroa was a pressure fighter. Omar Figueroa, who just fought Yordenis Ugas and got his fucking ass kicked. Whereas Shawn, who was known as a pressure fighter, seems to have grown from that, because he had a much more competitive outing with Ugas than Omar did.
He did way better.
And that is as a direct result of the observations and subsequent preparation of Team Porter, the Porter way. So when Kenny says these things, I don't think he's just saying shit to be saying shit. I think that he's touching on something that's very real, and we can make certain inferences about the future based on that.